In 1905, an 11-year-old forgot soda outside overnight. It froze solid on a stick. The first Popsicle. That accident kicked off a century of stolen ideas and courtroom fights, starting with the first bar to add chocolate. Eskimo Pie. The first chocolate-coated ice cream bar came from a kid who couldn't afford dessert. In 1921, schoolteacher Christian Nelson watched a boy in his shop agonize between ice cream and a chocolate bar. He could only afford one. Nelson figured out how to freeze chocolate onto ice cream, called it the ice cream bar, then landed on a different name and locked down the patent in January 1922. It was one of the first chocolate-coated bars to go widely commercial in the US. The patent didn't hold. Courts ruled the process behind it was too basic to own outright, and by the late 1920s, it was effectively invalidated, which is the real reason every company in this video could legally start coating ice cream in chocolate without paying Nelson a cent. The copycat wave wasn't a loophole, it was the front door, and everyone walked through it. The name didn't age well either. It's a slur against Native Alaskan people, and in 2020, the company dropped it. By early 2021, it relaunched as Edie's Pie, honoring Joseph Edie of Dreyer's Ice Cream. Same bar, new name. While that quiet reinvention was happening in Iowa, two other men were turning chocolate-coated ice cream into a street corner empire. Good humor. A 10-year-old's complaint is the whole reason ice cream bars come on a stick. In 1920, Youngstown, Ohio candy maker Harry Burt made his own chocolate-covered ice cream. His daughter took one bite and said it was too messy. His son had the fix. Freeze a wooden stick into the ice cream and use it as a handle. The bar on a stick was born. Good humor. Burt tried to patent it. The government said no repeatedly until 1923 when he loaded a 5-gallon bucket of bars, shipped them to Washington, and had officials taste them in person. The patent came through. Burt turned that into a legend. Freezers and bells bolted onto 12 trucks. The very first bell pulled straight off his son's bobsled. The good humor man became an actual job with a uniform and a code of conduct. Not everyone welcomed the money. In 1929, when a good humor plant opened in Chicago, the mob demanded $5,000 in protection, close to $70,000 today. Burt refused. The mob destroyed part of the Chicago fleet. The trucks lasted decades anyway, until 1978, when Good Humor sold off the entire fleet to sell through grocery stores instead. 4 bars survived as the classics, Candy Crunch, Chocolate Eclair, Strawberry Shortcake, and Toasted Almond, relaunched in 1992. Toasted Almond got quietly discontinued years later, and fans noticed. Losing an almond bar was nothing compared to the war over a square of chocolate. Klondike. The reason Klondike never went on a stick has nothing to do with taste. It started in 1922, too, made by the Isley family's Ohio Dairy Company, essentially a copy of the Eskimo Pie. For years, it barely left a handful of nearby states, but the Isleys made one rule stick. The Klondike stayed a square positioned as a grown-up treat. That shape is still its entire identity. You know the jingle. What would you do for a Klondike bar? Which launched in the 1980s after Kraft picked up distribution and pushed it national. The relationship soured. Kraft rolled out its own look-alike bar, and Klondike's parent company took Kraft to court over it, a trademark fight serious enough that it became one of the defining lawsuits in ice cream branding history. That's how seriously people took a square of chocolate ice cream. Unilever bought the brand in 1993. Klondike kept making headlines. In 2022, it discontinued the Choco Taco, and the internet lost it. A Reddit co-founder offered to buy the rights to save it, and a US senator joked about it publicly. The fanciest bar in the freezer, though, came from a dad who was just scared for his kid. Dove Bar. A father's fear for his son created the most expensive bar in the freezer. In 1956, Greek immigrant Leo Stefanos ran a candy shop in Chicago. His young son once ran into the street chasing an ice cream truck. It scared Leo half to death, so he made his own thick, hand-dipped chocolate ice cream bar at home, just to keep the kids close. It stayed a Chicago secret for years. In 1984, his son brought it to a food show in Washington, D.C., and buyers went crazy. Within months, it was in thousands of supermarkets. 2 years later, Mars bought the whole thing. Snickers or Mars? Mars didn't invent a new bar, it just pointed its candy empire at the freezer. Mars already owned Snickers, one of the country's best-selling candy bars, and used the chocolate know-how from the Dove deal to turn its own candy into ice cream. Snickers ice cream hit test markets in 1989. Milky Way and Three Musketeers followed in frozen form. Hershey took a different route. It doesn't manufacture ice cream. It licenses its name to companies that actually make and sell the frozen versions. That's why Reese's and Heath bars sit in the freezer, wearing a name that isn't really behind the wheel. While American brands were busy copying candy, one bar faked being from an entirely different country, and got away with it for decades. Häagen-Dazs. It sounds Danish. It's not. It's not even a real word. It was created by Reuben Mattis in the Bronx around 1960. The name means nothing. He made up a foreign-sounding word because he thought it sounded expensive, then printed a map of Denmark on the cartons. Those letters don't even combine in real Danish. Years later, a rival brand, Fudgsicle, ran the exact same fake Scandinavian trick, so Häagen-Dazs sued to stop them and lost. The court wasn't sympathetic to a company built on the same kind of made-up foreign branding, trying to claim exclusive rights to the trick. By then, Häagen-Dazs had been bought by Pillsbury, and Pillsbury used its size to fight dirty in a different way. It leaned on distributors to stop carrying a scrappy new competitor out of Vermont, Ben & Jerry's. Ben & Jerry's fired back in public with an aggressive anti-corporate marketing campaign, turning a distribution fight into a David and Goliath story that built the brand's underdog identity for decades. A made-up Danish brand from the Bronx became one of the biggest names in ice cream anyway, and made an enemy that would outlast it. One bar didn't need a fake country, it just needed a shell that cracks. Magnum. The loud crack when you bite a Magnum bar took a food scientist years to solve. Magnum launched in 1989, marketed as the first ice cream bar built for adults instead of kids. There was one problem. Real chocolate shatters and falls off in the freezer. Unilever's food scientists eventually cracked the formula, adjusting the fat content in the coating so it could survive freezing without falling apart, which is exactly why it cracks so loudly when you bite it instead. Magnum reached the US in 2011. The brand claims to sell over 1 billion bars a year worldwide and says it's the only major ice cream brand using real Belgian chocolate. In 2020, it launched a bar with ruby chocolate, the naturally pink variant almost nobody had heard of, as one of the first major US ice cream brands to do so. Not every legendary bar came from a big company. Some came from a rocket-shaped rivalry over the 4th of July. Bomb Pop. A Cold War rocket became a 4th of July tradition, and decades later, a courtroom fight. The Bomb Pop was invented in 1955 in Kansas City by James S. Merritt and D.S. Doc Abernethy of Merritt Foods at the height of Cold War rocket and bomb imagery. A red, white, and blue rocket shape built to cash in on the era's space-age patriotic mood. It became a 4th of July staple. Unilever's Popsicle brand later launched a look-alike patriotic rocket pop called the Firecracker. In 2014, the dispute went to court. Unilever sued the Bomb Pop's maker over the look and packaging of the product, and the Bomb Pop's side countersued, arguing Popsicle's, the original label, was misleading, given the Bomb Pop actually came first. That false advertising claim was allowed to move forward, 2 nearly matching patriotic popsicles, fighting over who got to say original. Some of the biggest names in the freezer never needed a stick at all. Fudgsicle. Chocolate found its way onto a stick without a single fight over who invented it. Fudgsicle grew out of the same corporate family as Popsicle, built as a fudge-flavored pop rather than true ice cream. It skipped nearly everything that defined the rest of this list. No patent battle, no copycat war, and just sold quietly for decades under a company that eventually became part of the Magnum ice cream company split. Push-up pop, no stick, no wrapper, no drip. This treat solved the ice cream truck's biggest problem. The push-up pop skipped all of it, a twist-up paper tube you pushed from the bottom as you ate. That single design choice made it one of the defining ice cream truck treats of the 1970s and 80s, less a dessert than a piece of playground currency. Pudding pops. Not everything on this list is technically ice cream, and this one might be the most beloved exception. Jell-O pudding pops were frozen pudding on a stick, not ice cream at all, and they launched in the early 1980s anyway to become one of the most mourned, discontinued treats in American freezer history. When Jell-O pulled them in the mid-1990s, the nostalgia never really faded. If this video claims to cover every ice cream bar, pudding pops earn their spot on a technicality nobody's actually mad about. It's it. Decades before Chipwich, San Francisco already had its own version, with an oatmeal cookie instead of chocolate chip. It's it is a long-running San Francisco regional favorite. Vanilla ice cream sandwiched between 2 oatmeal cookies, then dipped whole in chocolate. It predates the national ice cream sandwich boom by decades and still exists almost entirely as a West Coast product, which is exactly why it gets left out of national scripts and exactly why West Coast viewers notice when it is. The strangest success story of all, though, started with a guy selling cookies off a cart in New York, Chipwich. $1, a folding cart, and 60 vendors sold out across Manhattan in a single day. Richard LaMotta developed the Chipwich in the late 1970s. Ice cream squeezed between two chocolate chip cookies, rolled in more chips. In May 1982, he sent 60 street vendors across Manhattan selling them for $1 each. And by most accounts, the entire first batch sold out within hours. Daily sales kept climbing from there. Over the next 2 decades, more than 1 billion Chipwiches reportedly sold. The company changed hands several times before landing with Nestlé, which quietly killed it off because it competed with Nestlé's own ice cream sandwich. A billion-selling street legend, shut down by its own owner. It wasn't the only bar killed for business reasons, but the newer bars learned to sell something completely different. Not nostalgia, health. Skinny Cow. Long before Greek yogurt bars existed, a cow helped invent the entire low-calorie category. Skinny Cow launched in the 1990s and became one of the first major low-calorie ice cream bar brands in the US, years before Yasso or Clio existed. It proved there was real money in better-for-you ice cream, and every diet-conscious bar that came after, fruit bars, protein bars, Greek yogurt bars, owes it a debt, whether the brand gets the credit or not. Outshine. $4 billion once changed hands over a simple fruit bar. Outshine launched in 2013, made with real fruit and sometimes no dairy, and grew into a major player in frozen fruit bars. In 2019, Nestlé sold its entire U.S. ice cream business, including Outshine and the U.S. rights to the Häagen-Dazs name, to Froneri, a joint venture with investment firm PAI Partners, in a deal worth $4 billion. Even a simple fruit bar is part of a massive money game. Paletas. Corporate America was still patenting fruit bars when an older tradition had already been selling them from carts for generations. Paletas, Mexican-style ice pops often made with fresh fruit, real fruit chunks, or Mexican crema, predate nearly every corporate fruit bar in this video. They're typically handmade and sold from carts or paleterias rather than mass-manufactured in a factory, and their popularity across the US has grown for decades without a single trademark war or corporate buyout driving it. Nobody needed a courtroom to make them a household name. The real health explosion, though, came from 2 childhood friends handing out samples, one at a time. Yasso. 2 kindergarten friends built a national brand with zero advertising budget. Amanda Klein and Drew Harrington had been friends since kindergarten. In 2009, they started making frozen Greek yogurt bars that tasted like dessert but came in under 150 calories. They couldn't afford ads, so they showed up at events and handed out samples, one person at a time. It worked. Yasso grew into one of the fastest growing frozen brands in the country, and in 2023, Unilever acquired it. Another founder went even further. He spent years building his own machines just to get his bar right. Clio. It took custom-built machines to recreate a single childhood memory from Ukraine. Sergei Konchakovsky grew up in Ukraine eating a creamy cheesecake-like treat. Years later, noticing that leftover strained Greek yogurt in his fridge had a similar texture, he set out to recreate that taste in the US. The result was Clio, a Greek yogurt bar wrapped in chocolate. By multiple accounts, nailing the texture at scale took years of trial and error, including custom-built equipment. Each bar carries about 8 grams of protein and roughly 150 calories. A childhood snack from Ukraine became a protein bar on American shelves. All of these bars, old and new, just got swept into the biggest ice cream shakeup in recent history. Drumstick. Since 1928, this cone has never needed a comeback because it never left. I.C. Parker invented the Drumstick, a cone lined with a fudge plug at the bottom, filled with vanilla ice cream, dipped in chocolate, and rolled in peanuts. Nestlé picked it up and kept making it almost exactly the same way for nearly 100 years. No rescue story required to stay one of the best-selling ice cream products in the country. Drumstick proved a bar doesn't need drama to last, it just needs to keep showing up. Not every brand figured that out through a grocery store deal, though. Dilly Bar. This dessert skipped the grocery aisle entirely and still became a national icon. The Dilly Bar started at Dairy Queen in the mid-1950s. A dome of soft serve dipped in chocolate on a stick. Unlike almost everything else in this video, it never went national through grocery freezers. It stayed a chain-exclusive treat sold only at Dairy Queen for close to 70 years, without ever needing a supermarket deal to become one of the most recognizable bars in America. But the biggest story of all was still coming. Unwrap one of these next time, and you're holding 100 years of accidents, lawsuits, and pure genius. If you had no idea your favorite bar had this much drama behind it, subscribe. There's a whole freezer full of stories left.